Okay, we are going. So I am Jeff Pfitzer filling in for Tristan and Kevin at Success Boardroom, and I am here today with Christine Haas, who is a PR guru. And I think when you talk about PR in real estate, that's not a common topic, right? We all talk about lead gen and automation and branding and marketing and advertising, but we don't talk about PR. So I'm actually really excited that I get to fill in today because I get to pick the brain of the guru of PR. Christine, would you please introduce yourself? Tell the listeners or the viewers a little bit about yourself, what your background is, and how you got into PR.
Jeff, I think you need to be my agent now. I appreciate the introduction.
I'm for hire.
Way too nice. Yes. I'm a former news anchor and investigative reporter. I left the business, TV business, about 3 years ago and started my own PR firm. And I worked in markets like Houston, San Diego, that type of thing, and started my very first job in Amarillo, Texas. So I've been in communities of all sizes and dealing with the media. The reason why I left is twofold. I mean, right now, media, as you know, very few people watch the news anymore. They're seeing everything on their mobile device. And if there's a news concern that they're going to get that from their mobile device, or they'll see it on Facebook these days, fewer and fewer people are sitting down and watching the news at night as a consistent theme. And ratings are suffering because everybody's trying to keep up with the issues of social media getting there first. You see all the people reporting news. iReporter from CNN is a really good example. So that's my background, why I left. And a real need I saw was to find a niche in providing a service to entrepreneurs, business owners, and that type for actual media placement. So when I was in TV, I would get hired by PR agencies nonstop to come in and help them understand why they weren't getting their clients on TV. And it really was because they didn't understand TV at all. They didn't understand the deadlines. They didn't understand how to reach reporters. They just didn't know what it was like inside a newsroom anymore, and if ever. And so what most people don't really realize right now, especially, is that reporters, even in New York City and LA, women in high heels are doing their own video and editing as well. So the best message here is that reporters are stressed beyond stressed. They're trying to fill deadlines that are almost impossible for them to keep. They're trying to come up with news stories. Their responsibility is to come up with organic stories to keep their job and to be, the source finder for great stuff in their community. And they're desperate for information and or actual stories that will resonate with their news managers and, of course, at the end, their viewers. So what I've done is I've got 2 people who work with me, all former journalists, and we tap into the proper formula for getting a story on the news. And it depends on who your customer is. So if you are a realtor or a mortgage broker in Nashville, Tennessee, for example, and you're thinking, gosh, how do I get the word out about my business? How do I touch more people? How do I stand out among all my competition? The reason you're not getting on the news, if you've tried, is because you're probably not reaching the reporters in the right way, and maybe you don't simply know how. So that's why I'm here today, to kind of help you understand what we do to get our clients on TV. And yeah, we have a lot of contacts already, but there are plenty of times that I'm just, and nobody to these reporters. I've never talked to them before. I have no actual contact, but I know how to pitch them. So I wanted to go to my slide deck if I could share the screen.
Sure. And I have a question before you even get started too, and you can go to the slide deck if you want. But so when you think about everything you just said, there's 2 things that stood out to me. One, it's interesting that you say these reporters, they're doing their own work, and basically what I heard was it's all about content. If they don't find the right content, nobody's going to watch. Their stories aren't going to get picked up. And that's the exact same thing we talk about in real estate and mortgage all the time is when you're creating media, it's all about your content, whether it's video or text, it doesn't matter. If the content is good enough, you're going to get engagement. You're going to get viewers, right? So that's super important. But 2, one question would be, if I'm a realtor, I'm thinking to myself right now, why do I want to be on the news? For obvious reasons, I guess, influence. But you also prefaced it by saying, it's hard to get ratings anymore. People don't watch the news anymore. So tell me more, tell the realtor why they want to create this PR.
Yes, it really is what you do with that coverage, because as we mentioned from the get-go, people aren't watching the news as much. So what you do is you get that segment, you get it online, and you put it out through your social, and you use it for your credibility. But Longdone and his partner Mike, I've worked with them and really helped get them some placement in Minnesota. And they were masters of using the story and then pushing it out and getting organic shares like crazy. Long actually even got an interview in New York.
Yeah.
Yes, he was telling me that he had brokers and realtors calling him in New York saying, "Hey, great to see you," And so it shows the reach you can have, not only from the time it airs on the news, but also what you do with it. And the other part of it is this is really timeless. So for example, I always tell clients, if they come on with me and, maybe they need me for 3 or 6 months, but once we get them that coverage, take a break, and use the stories and push that out in your social media or in your marketing, because nobody sees a timestamp on it. Unless you're standing there in a bikini, nobody knows it's the middle of summer, right? And of course, you're not going to do that as a celebrity realtor or broker. But my point is that it is not timestamped. So you can use that next year. I mean, as long as it's consistent. But I always tell folks, use it to your advantage, build your credibility, get a few hits, and then use it with Facebook ads. Drive it out to the zip codes you need it. And because that's where everybody's looking. They're on their social media, they're on their mobile device nonstop. You reach them where they're at.
That's really smart. I didn't think about that. And the amount of influence you build. So like you said, because it's the news, because people probably think the same thing you just said, nobody's doing it. So those who actually do it and then leverage it and use it in those proper channels, you're going to be the influencer. You're going to be the authority on whatever it is you want to be the authority on.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that reporters are just hungry for good stories. And often if they have a story, say, the market's crashing and they don't already have a mortgage broker or economist on standby that they already know in their community, they sit down and they Google the city name and mortgage broker or whoever, and whoever is available at that time and they can reach and make their deadline is going to get on the air. They don't go through exhaustive, unless it's an investigative report, they don't go through exhaustive past history. So you could just be the lucky person to get that credibility. But at home or to anybody on the social device, they're like, man, that guy's really killing it. He's on the news. They're featuring him or her for their expertise, when you just may be the lucky person. So I always say, if you can develop a relationship to be on speed dial when a story in your niche comes up for that reporter after you've already pitched them a couple times, that's golden. And I can get to that after a little while about how to nurture that relationship. But the first thing to realize is that you just have to be there when they need it. If you can get the story and serve it up in the right way, that is all you need to do to get on the air. The other thing that I would get into is the fact that, it's very easy to think, well, I know a lot about real estate and I want to be on TV. There are different formats for that. So for example, for Long and Mike, when Long went to New York, he was on a morning show as an expert. He was being interviewed in that fashion. However, most of the stories that you would want to pitch, especially in your community, say Nashville, Tennessee, for example, you don't want it to look like a commercial. That's the biggest thing. If you go to the reporter and say, I got a great story, I'm a realtor and this neighborhood is really booming and I've just got lots of stuff going on, I'd love to tell you more about it, they're going to say, go buy some ad time. Like, that's not a story. I mean, that might be part of the story, but that's not the real story. So what you have to do is you have to find the victim, so to speak, to profile as well. So you're the expert and you have to serve up the ability to have somebody who's been touched by a trend or something that's happening in the community. So say that, you know of one pocket neighborhood that is getting a lot of first-time home buyers. It's really taking off. Maybe it's a millennial angle, whatever it might be. That way, you tell the reporter, I've got all the ingredients for you. I'm here to tell you the trend that I'm spotting. I have a person who can talk about how they just bought a house or they're looking for a house, and you can profile them. And then last but not least, video. You have to let them know, I will have visuals for you. I will be able to show you a house that we can tour. Because it's very easy unless you're not doing TV, it's very easy to say, oh, they'll figure out the video. No, that's a big component. Sometimes the problem is you can't get into somebody's house to get video. And the news reporter is going, well, I can't draw cartoons, so this has got to be video. So we've got to come up with something. So that's the main ingredient. You have to have the expert, which you can be as the realtor or the mortgage broker. Maybe you're spotting a financial trend. And you have to have somebody who's experiencing what you're talking about. So they're in the middle of it. One of the stories recently, for example, Minnesota, we talked about the story of what are we going to put on the news because they're in a deep freeze. I'm like, gosh, there's pressure. How am I going to get a realtor on the air when they're in the middle of a deep freeze and nobody wants to come out of the house? Right. So I thought, what if we do a story about the fact that housing numbers are going to be a little bit off, given the fact that everybody's not looking for homes. They've already taken a slump in the last couple months because of the interest rates. So now we're going to look at the numbers coming out in January. They're going to be a little bit skewed all across the north because nobody's out shopping. So then that was the story I pitched. So that's how you try to find trending stories and immerse yourself into the news, even when it may seem like it's impossible.
Awesome. That's really awesome. So yeah, so let's get into the slide deck.
Yes, let me see how I share this here. And okay. You see that deck?
Not yet. There it comes. I see myself. There it is.
Okay, good. Okay, so biggest question for anybody is like, okay, how do I make news given what I do? So what makes news? What really piques a reporter's interest? It is impactful. It's something that is happening in your community. It's something that's really having a touch or a change on something that's happening in your community. It's timely. Like I mentioned, the deep freeze. Okay, how do I get into something that they're already talking about? How do I figure out a way to connive my way into that? Find what's trending in the news right now. Interest rates up and down, you can talk about that. Find an example of somebody who's had a hard time getting interest rates, or maybe had a hard time selling their house because people are thinking that the interest rates are too high, even though we all know that they were just at historic lows before. Educational, it's very important to add an element. Just think about like when you watch a news story, if you sit down and watch the news, or if you're watching anything on your phone, what's going to make you remember the story? It's going to educate you. It's going to be something that is breaking news or something quite timely. It's bizarre. Think about the water skiing squirrel. We always talk about that at the end of the newscast. It's kind of like old hat that every ending of every newscast has to end with something that's weird or bizarre. But it attracts attention. Think about the videos that go viral. Anything like that that's a little unusual will get a reporter's attention. Conflict, certainly that is always, whether it's politics or whatever, it is conflict-based. That's going to make news. Think about, neighborhoods under construction, historic neighborhoods. Maybe there's a conflict about people don't want you to have new construction in that area. These are kinds of issues that will resonate with a reporter and a news manager because it's changing the dynamics of their news market. And last but not least, emotional. When things are emotional, it make you laugh, they make you cry, it makes you stop and you remember the story and you tell somebody, did you see that? I felt so bad when I saw X, Y, and Z happen. Maybe it's somebody being uprooted from their home in an area of new development. I'm just trying to give some examples in this area of expertise. But those are the things that make news. And if you're trying to think like, how can I resonate with a reporter, or how do I even pitch a reporter on something, those are the elements that you're looking for. And then here's one of the things that I always tell clients to be prepared. Okay, so you got the pitch ready. You're thinking of a story to talk to a reporter. We'll talk about how to reach them here in a bit. But do you have everything that it takes to be ready for the attention that you're going to get? Do you have a pretty website? Even if it's not pretty, is it functional? Is it okay to be able to send traffic there? Because when they say the name of you and the graphic comes up on the lower portion of the interview and it says your website, people are going to click it. It's going to be on the online version. All of this should be done on the front end, because think about it. If you're on the news tomorrow, your story gets out there and it goes on their online version, you're really excited. But like we said, we're going to take that and blast that out, that online posting out to your social media. If it's incorrect or if something's not right there about your website or your web address or anything, you're going to lose all of that opportunity of future traction.
In other words, you have to kind of be legitimized in a way. Like you can't just go out and put a news story out without having a place for people to go do research on you.
You actually can do whatever I'm just trying to help people maximize it. Sure. I mean, you can do it without a functional website if you want to, but I'm just saying that you're going to lose some of the traction that you would normally get.
Of course.
It's not to say that you shouldn't do it, because if you get the opportunity, don't say no, but at least find a way to maximize it. And then, a media kit. Some people say, do you need a media kit? Everything is online these days. A media kit is really just like the specifics, your biography, that type of thing. You want that on your website to really showcase who you are when people go and look. Because let's face it, real estate, no matter what industry, is competitive now. So you want to stand out. Is your messaging prepared? That's one thing that I work with clients, is to make sure that I tap into their ability to talk about their history in their community. So there's one way to answer a news reporter's question, and then there's another way to answer it properly, but also immerse your own history and give yourself a little nod. So for example, what's this development look like to you, sir? You've seen all these developments in this community evolve. This is really interesting how it's changing the dynamics here. Yes, it is. I've been in this community for the last 18 years, and I can't tell you how many times that I've wondered when this development would start. So that's why you just drop little nuggets of your own history to, brag a little without bragging. Use your wealth. And that's how I help people prepare for their interviews, so they really can throw that in there. Any research that you have, traction that you've had, maybe you own a big brokerage firm or something of that nature. Talk about the growth that you've seen in your community or across your state. And then an investment funnel ready to capture increased attention. Of course, that's what we were just talking about. Like, you want to have that funnel ready for, online interest if you can. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is how to reach reporters. So the easiest way to find a reporter is to go on the website of the station and look for biographies, news reporter biographies, and start following them. Most of them will have on the end of their bio, their Twitter and their Facebook handles. And, go follow them and find out which stories that they've been covering. However, sometimes their email addresses are included. So that's your instant way to reach a reporter. That's the first thing you want to do. You don't want to call them, because how nobody wants to pick up the phone these days, ever, even reporters, unless it's a story they're working on. So I always say start with emails. And then if the email address is not there, this is a way to go. There's a website called newsblues.com. And for a small subscription, I think it's like $15 or $16 a month. Even if I don't even know if it's that much. Basically, it gives you all of the station information on every station across the country, including radio. So if you go to News Blues and you go to station ownership groups, if you click on markets, so if you're in Nashville, it gives you all of the information of every news station and news outlet in your community. They'll give their website. It'll also give, and we can go further into this later, but it goes into the news director, the assignment manager. That's where you're going to want to send your emails if you can't reach a proper reporter. This gives you the opportunity to go to their website, find all of the biographies of these reporters, and check out, hey, who covers, real estate, or who recently did a story about development in my area? Who's covering the financial numbers? And get an understanding of what beats these reporters have. Sometimes stations, frankly, have gone away from having beats, but it still does happen. So you might have somebody who just focuses on land growth or development in a certain community, because those are really good for demographics of viewers for stations. So that's why I always encourage people, do your homework. This is what I do day in and day out for clients. And, we can do that. But if you want to do it on your own, it's not impossible. You just have to find a way to reach the reporter. So the other thing is do your homework. So when you go through and research the outlets of the reporters, again, figure out what story might resonate with them. So, for example, there's a couple ideas. Current news cycle, we talked about the ice storm or cold weather or something like that. look for who's covering weather stories. You know, if it's the Super Bowl and somebody is, you'll see stations will send certain reporters about a week ahead of time to different communities for breaking news stories or, you know, evolving news stories. So figure out which reporter it is. If you've got something to serve them, send that email to them. The thing is that they're always looking for good stories. I cannot say that enough. But you can't, you know, go to the wrong person and expect to get the story. You've got to go to the person who's looking for the story in your area.
So expand a little bit more on that. Expand a little bit more on when you say that. So, you know, again, we're speaking to real estate agents here.
Yes.
Do you have an example of like what a Mike or Long have done in order to pique that interest for a reporter?
Yes. So we worked together on some of the trends that they were seeing. One of the story pitches that we were recently talking about was the number of retirement facilities that were being built in Minneapolis, in the Twin Cities, and the fact that all of this construction is going up for these retirement facilities because that is the segment of the population that's really growing. So we started talking about, you know, do you have somebody who is evolving into that? Or can we talk to a reporter about the population that's really going to boom there because of that? There's also stuff like, I think it was United Van Lines recently came out with a study. They do studies all the time, all these moving companies do, and they talk about the trends that they're seeing in the relocation. You know, you always hear the number of Californians coming to Texas. You know, this is probably happening in your state in a different way. So look for changes that are happening in research that are, you know, that's already out there, and then find a way to connect to that. So that United Van Line story, for example, said that, you know, it gave me the demographics of different states that are kind of fluctuating. So there were more people moving from places like New York and LA. I don't think it was LA. I think it was New York and New Jersey, maybe Chicago, moving to the Twin Cities because it's less expensive and the taxes were better. So perfect. So I talked to Mike and I said, hey, do you have a client who might be a good example of that? A high income earner from New York or Chicago or something like that, who's relocating to the Twin Cities? And he's like, I think I do. So we started talking about that. And now what you have to do in order to get that perfect formula for the reporter is you have to find out, you know, can that person, number one, yeah, you got the client. Call the client. Are you interested in being featured in a news story that we might have coming up? Would you be available? They say yes. Okay, when's your availability? So you already know you can package this little story together perfectly for the reporter. Because remember, you got to think in terms of deadline. They don't want to be running around town for 6 hours to put a story together that's got to be on the air at 5 p.m. and a different version at 6 and possibly go cover breaking news at 10 p.m. So you've got to think in a small window and then talk about in your head location. I don't want them having to travel, you know, an hour each way in order to it, or they're going to say no. So you got to make it as easy as possible for them. So for example, in that story, you know, that person who's just relocating in from, I think it was Chicago, then we get them available on, say, Tuesday. Okay, you're available in the afternoon. Great. So Long or Mike, are you available during this time? Yes. Okay, good. Now you know the visuals, and they handle all this quite a bit themselves. They're pretty good in this regard. They take it and run. But then you craft the email to the reporter. So I reach out to the reporter and say, hey, I got a really good story. There's a new trend that just came out in this study from United Van Lines or whatever it was. And we've got a really good example for you. We've got a person who's relocating from a bigger city because of the Twin Cities. Hey, Twin Cities now looks good here because we've got lower taxes in the Twin Cities than other cities, and we're getting some high income earners. Would you be interested in doing this story? We can do it within an hour and a half on Tuesday at 1. And we have some visuals for you too. See how easy that is for the reporter? They're going, great, yes, I'm out the door. I do this interview. We call it one-stop shop. If you can do it all in one location or have everybody available at the same place, that's even better for the reporter because they're thinking, I can shoot this in an hour and be back and I actually get lunch today. And I know that sounds crazy, but it is true. I mean, we all run around like chickens with our heads cut off in our own businesses, right? But these news folks often don't even get to eat because they're running so fast to try to keep up.
Awesome. That's awesome. And you brought up a good point too, that even I guess I don't even think about it even for myself, but so I create I have several Facebook pages, and one of them is an influence, like inspirational type page where I set big goals, like physical goals, and achieve them. And last year, I ran 2018 miles in 2018, and
Wow.
we put that story in front of a couple of reporters, and one of them picked it up. But we waited, obviously, till the end of the year because it's that time of year when everybody's talking about goals and their New Year's resolutions and all that stuff. And not only did it get picked up, she came back for a backup story when I hit the goal because I guess it went over so well. And I guess I didn't even think about it till I was talking to you, like, well, crap, I already did this. That's, but that, I guess we didn't like cognitively think, ooh, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
But I guess we did it without, just subconsciously, basically.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's why it worked. I mean, you had a timely story. It was unusual and fantastic, and it was educational. You had all of those elements. And then I'm sure there was some emotion to it because, God, you ran 2,018 miles in the year 2000. That's a lot. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Yeah. So I can see why you did well. I just put up my contact information. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me. That's my website. And there's a couple websites there if you have any information. But the biggest thing that I want to talk about is just at the end of the day, you can do this yourself. I mean, sure, people hire pricey PR firms. If you ever want to know, like, what is the right amount to pay for a PR firm, there are people who will charge you $10,000 a month. And unless you have a big brokerage or something like that, that's pretty insane. That's a large amount. I will say that it should never be that much. If you work these tools yourself, you just start watching the news, educate yourself. You can do this yourself without having to hire anybody. Sure, it's easier, if you have the income, but you don't have to. Just come up with the right ingredients. And the other thing is watch the news a couple times a week if you can. See what's on there. And, and we're talking about pitches to reporters. We talk about the ingredients. You always want to look and see if there is some connection that you have to the reporter. So when you're going through, maybe they did a story last week on the interest rates, not specific to the story that you're going to pitch to them, but they did something about that. And compliment them, or at least acknowledge that you've watched their story. When I was a news anchor, there were so many times that I would get emails from big PR firms and they'd call me by my predecessor's name. It's like they didn't even update their files to know who's in that chair, and so it happens more and more. And then they'll pitch me on a story from like 3 states away. It's like, clearly you're just trying to make your numbers on your emails to go out for your client, and nobody's ever going to do that story. So know who you're talking to. Look for somebody who, did that story. Say, hey, wanted to let you know. And the subject line of your pitch should be follow up on such and such story, something like that. Say that, and I often joke, but it is the truth, and I know it works for a lot of people. When I did a news story, and if I saw a follow-up question or a follow-up comment about a story or follow-up concern, I mean, you want to be careful with your words. I would always open that email because I'd think, did I make a mistake? Did someone out me? I mean, that's truly, as a reporter, you're worried about everything was right because you're on it as fast as possible. If somebody emails me, it's usually I did something wrong. I screwed up a fact, and I'm immediately going to open up that email so I can fix it. So I always tell people, look on the subject line, find a way to catch their attention, and know the story. So the story aired on interest rates 2 nights ago. Follow up comment about interest rate story, the date. Hi, just wanted to let you know, I watched your story the other night on the interest rates. It really resonated with me because of X, Y, and Z. I thought you did a nice job. Just 1 or 2 sentences acknowledging that you know what they did. They're going, oh, you know what? This person actually watches me and knows what they're talking about. I'd also like to offer to you another story idea. And then that's where you include your pitch. So that's what I always say, like, get their attention, acknowledge that you have a brain and that you actually watch what they're doing and that you're invested in what they've touched on, and then put your pitch in there. Not really long, just get their attention, then say, if you'd like more information, let me know. Here's my cell phone number. And then if they email back, always ask for their cell phone number. Everybody these days, we're terrible about checking email. Doesn't matter whichever industry, it doesn't matter if it's marketing, we're just bad on it. So get their cell phone number and text them. Everybody's doing text messages. Say, do you mind if I text you more information? Much easier because nobody wants to sit and go through their email. If you get a text message, they're going to pay attention to it. Other thing I can offer is the days, the time periods of when you want to send your emails. Most newsrooms have a 9 o'clock meeting and a 1 to 1:30 afternoon meeting. That means is you have a day shift and you have an afternoon shift that's working for the 5, 6, and 10. Mostly the day shift is, blending over in the 5 and 6, but you've got a couple reporters who only come in at 1:30 or 1 o'clock, and then they do maybe a little bit for the 6 o'clock, and then their main story is on at 10 o'clock. So you want to email them right as they're looking to go into their meeting. So say 7:30, 8 a.m. is a really good time because they're looking for story ideas because they have to come up with it to their managers. And then, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon might be a good time to hit another reporter who's doing the evening cycle. But if you can kind of get a rhythm, if you watch the news a couple times a week, you'll see the same reporters' faces during those, that 10 p.m. newscast, so you know how to target that.
Gotcha. Hey, and would you hit the stop share there so I can stop staring at myself?
Oh, I'm sorry. No problem.
Oh, good.
Better?
I think the audience would much rather have you have your camera on so they can see your face than my ugly bald.
I don't know about that. No. Is it back to normal now?
Yes, it is. Thank you. Yeah, your camera's not on though, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. We're also recording this as well. So, if there's a couple of things I took out of that last piece too is you basically, in a nutshell, butter up your reporter, right? Basically
Absolutely.
kiss their ass so they are like, ooh, they like me, so I'm gonna like them.
It's always a cycle. It's like a sales cycle. I mean, think about if you're going to try to talk to somebody about pitching them, you're going to want to make them feel good. It's the, what is that book that, how to win friends and influence people? It's the same thing no matter which industry, but especially in this situation, acknowledge them, say I've act educated, and it usually helps quite a bit. Other thing that I would suggest is to follow up with them. So say you get your news story on the air, send cookies to the station. I know that sounds crazy, but cookies, free food at pretty much any employment is good, but especially news stations, they're going to tell you, I can't take specific gifts for me, but if you give food to the newsroom, send some business cards, or pens or whatever it is with that, so that way they hold it and remember it. So your same marketing tools, you do it in a newsroom.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we're pretty familiar with that in the real estate business because we're always buttering people up with gifts and drinks and sporting tickets and all that kind of stuff. So
exactly, same premise.
Awesome.
You just can't do it too much. Yeah.
Right. No, it totally resonates. I mean, everything. Even going back to just the whole conversation about creating the content to now here we are now just buttering up the person that's kissing the right ass basically, which is exactly what we do.
It's true.
That's awesome. Well, Christine, this has been fantastic. I think a lot of people take a lot from this because I think we're talking about a medium here that nobody's using. Again, going back to the beginning, you said we think of TV and the news as kind of a dying medium, but I love what you said because it's like, don't think of that piece. Think of how you can take this, create media, and then funnel it out to every channel that you possibly have. To create that influence to show people, oh, look who was on the news, and then it's going to grab attention, and that's powerful.
It is, especially in communities where you want to build your reputation. So in your city, and then you run those Facebook ads or whatever it might be to your zip codes. It brings down your marketing budget. It uses a lot of ability of touching a lot of people without too much pressure.
That's fantastic. So again, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, I'm going to go share that slide one more time. If they want to get a hold of you, this is how they would do so, either through one of those websites or through your email, correct?
That's correct. Yep. Or my phone number, you can text me anytime. It's 512-751-1592. That's
awesome.
Well.
Awesome. And I guess one thing I will ask you too before we finish is, so you kind of just explain to people how they can do it themselves, but I assume that's what you do. So Mike and Long worked with you to build their influence, right? To get the connections to be able to do this. I guess that is an option for anyone who doesn't want to go try to do this on their own, is they can just come to you and you will help walk them through and probably get them connected and get them in front of the right people, correct?
That's correct. Yes. And I often tell people too, as I said in the beginning, and I hate to talk myself out of work, but you don't need to do it long term. You just get a few months under your belt. We like to do 6 months. We try because sometimes, like for example, entrepreneur, those types of outlets, you'll do an interview with a reporter and then it may not, or a writer, and it may not actually publish for a month or two. So we like to get some traction going. But I always say, do it for a couple months, take a break or wait on your budget and then use that, recycle it for a while, and then maybe you got some new angles. But you will learn a lot. Even if you're working with us, you're going to learn a lot about the process and how it works, that it will be pretty easy for you to do on your own, not too far down the road.
Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. It's been an honor to get to interview you today. I'm really glad that Tristan and Kevin were not available, so I got to do it. So I'm really glad to reacquaint myself with you, and this has been fantastic. I can't wait to share it.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time. It was nice
Awesome.
connecting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.